weeks ago, we started the series with kind of what was probably felt like a pretty bold statement or a big statement. I mean, we started this series with, here's the statement right here. Ready? Your parents' behavior, not their advice, determined whether or not you would want to be like them or even be with them. It was your parents' behavior, the way that they treated each other, the way they treated those around them, the way they treated the server in the restaurant, the way that they treated you, the way it was the way that they behaved, not your curfew, not your allowance amount, not any of those other things that determined whether or not you thought they were someone worth emulating or even someone you would want to hang out with now that you're old enough to hang out with them. And of course, the problem with that, or the challenge is that the same is true for our kids. It will be our behavior that will determine whether or not they want to spend time with us. And so we looked at the law of love, right? This is this new commandment that Jesus gives. We looked at this law of love, John chapter 13, this new commandment. And this, of course, this commandment is for all believers, right? Jesus gave us this new commandment for all believers. And it's not just for parents, but it is also definitely for parents. It's not just for parents, but it's also definitely for parents. And here's what it is, right? Here's the new commandment from Jesus, to love others the way I have loved you. That's the new commandment, John 13. Jesus taught us to love others the way that he has loved us. And then we looked at Paul's elaboration on this new commandment in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and where he defines love, the Apostle Paul defines love so well that in 1 Corinthians 13, he defines it so well that we often read this portion of Scripture at weddings. We often read it at weddings. And what we find is that love requires us, in verse 4, where he starts with the list of love requirements, is that love requires us to be patient. That was the first thing he said. And so we spent a whole week just camped out on those few words. Love is patient when it comes to parenting. And here's how we define patience. And we said it was, patience is picking up on someone else's natural pace and rhythm and adjusting our pace and rhythm accordingly. Patience is when we pick up on someone else's natural pace or their natural rhythm and we adjust our rhythm or our pace accordingly. And I shared this story where I remember when Isley was very little, like 9 months, she was able to walk. She started walking just super young, and it was really kind of crazy and confusing, and Crystal was already way pregnant by then, and she would just run and whatever. But we would walk in public, and what would I do? I couldn't walk at my usual pace when I was walking and holding Isley's hand, right? I had to adjust my pace to her pace. And this is so we don't drive a physical wedge between us and our kids, right? If we walk at a different pace than our children, then there becomes a gap, right? But also, when we do this same thing, when we walk at a different pace in the way that we push them emotionally or the way that we expect more from them than they're able to produce at their age, then we create an emotional wedge between us and our children. And then in week 2, we started with this statement. God's design for discipline is to create peace in your home and righteousness in the lives of your children. God's design for discipline is to create peace in your home and the fruit of righteousness in the lives of your kids. And if you don't have peace and righteousness, then you may be punishing your kids, but you're not disciplining them. You may be punishing them, but you're not providing godly discipline. And so we continued with the Apostle Paul's elaboration in 1 Corinthians 13 on the great commandment, or this new commandment, that love is kind. That's the second phrase. Love is patient. We got it into love is kind. And then we define kindness like this. Here's what we said. Kindness is loaning someone your strength rather than reminding them of their weakness. Loaning someone else your strength instead of reminding them of their weakness. And we learned how to side with our kids and how to loan them our strength even when they've messed up. We learned about how to be, oh no, parents, instead of, I told you so, parents. And we learned to avoid sarcasm with our kids, and we learned about honor and how important it is to display it and how important it is to live it out in our marriage relationships in front of our kids. And here's why, right? Because honor is superior to obedience. Honor is superior to obedience. Honor looks for how I can obey well, how I can follow how I can follow not just the letter of the law, but the heart of the law, right? What mom and dad said, that's honor. Obedience looks for how much I can get away with before I'm going to get in trouble, how much I can get away with before I get caught. It's the letter of the law versus the heart of the law, or the spirit of the law. And so today, I want to spend some time talking about the difference between punishment and discipline, because there's a big difference. I want to talk about the difference between punishment and discipline and look specifically at how to discipline, not punish, towards relationship restoration. So my name's Nathan. I'm the lead pastor here at Ridgeline, and we have been in this series for a couple of weeks, and I'm just really excited about it as we continue on over the next couple of weeks. And I just want to say, man, I have learned a lot throughout this series, and my kids are in for it. And so, I'm just kidding. One of them's in here. My kids we are making adaptations on our parenting, and but I just want to highlight our tech team this morning. They did an incredible job. So they got all set up twice. They got all set up this morning, and then something didn't work. That was kind of a big deal. And so then we had to break it all down and reroute everything. And then they set up again for a second time. And that's why we started service, 2-3 minutes later than we usually do, or whatever it was. And so far, everything's working wonderfully, and they are just doing an amazing job. So we give it up for our tech team that's usually back there, but only half of them are back there, and some of them are back there. And so I don't get to hear all the smart remarks because we put them in a separate room. So awesome. Well, today, right after service, we'll be doing Starting Point. And so if you this would give us the opportunity to get to know you and meet you. We'd love to learn more about you. But also, it gives you the opportunity to ask questions and to get to know us. And we'll be talking about things like who we are as a church, why we do, what we believe, what happens to your money when you give. All those types of things will be our kind of our oversight and accountability processes and all of that. And so Starting Point 1.0 will be today, immediately following service, by about 10 or 15 minutes. And so we'll just get you connected out in the lobby, and then there'll be an environment set up specifically for that. So we started this series 9 months later in February, because oftentimes in February we talk about marriage, relationships, the intimate parts of relationships, and close connections, and you get what I'm saying? There's kids in the room, right? So we're not doing that kind of series. And but we did think, well, what we should do really is we should have a series about what happens 9 months later. Let's do a parenting series. And so that's how we ended up here. And the thought of having kids can be this exciting thought, but after all the romance is over and after all the, the dreaming and the planning is over, it dawns on you that you have someone else's life in your hands that you're responsible for. And so if you're a parent, or you're about to be a parent, or you hope to be a parent, or you're helping another parent with parenting, or you're watching your own kids parent, then this is a great series for you. And regardless of if you're a parent or not, we may all have realized that just because we had parents or have parents doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be good parents. Or just because we were kids doesn't mean we're going to be great at raising kids, any more than having a surgery would make one qualified to perform a surgery, right? And like we've said every week in this series, if you've read through the Bible, if you've read the Bible much at all, you may have noticed that there are no good family dynamics really recorded in Scripture. There's no really great ideal family to go like, whose family was really great. Like we should look up, we should be like this family, and it's just not there. But when it comes to dysfunctional families, like Scripture's a gold mine. Like there's so many great dysfunctional families and examples of what not to do. And we took this example all the way back to the first family, and we went a couple of thousand years through with random examples through the Old Testament. And as we begin to talk about discipline, we need to go back and look at a verse that we looked at last week. And here it is, Hebrews chapter 12, excuse me. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. No discipline feels pleasant at the time. Nobody enjoys discipline. In fact, parents, if your kids enjoy the discipline, I don't think you're doing it right, okay? It's not pleasant at the time, but in the end, it does produce something. And the problem is that if you're only punishing and not disciplining, that also produces something. Oftentimes it's bitterness and frustration and anger and broken relationships. And if you are adjusting or adapting your parenting style, and if you choose kindness like we talked about last week, loaning someone else your strength, and honor, which is superior to obedience, as the centerpiece of your home, then any behavior that is dishonoring requires a response and discipline. This behavior can be defined by what we'll call the 3 Ds. Here's the 3 Ds. So any of these behaviors are appropriate for discipline, for disciplinary actions. Dishonesty, disrespect, and disobedience. Dishonesty, disrespect, and disobedience. The 3 Ds. And we correct childish behavior or normal childish behavior, like regular things, like, your kids do something silly or whatever. We correct those things, but we discipline for the 3 Ds. Discipline for the 3 Ds. And you can't ignore it. Ignoring it rewards it. When our children are dishonest, disrespectful, or disobedient, we can't just ignore it, because ignoring it rewards it. And of course, you've probably heard some of this saying here that what's rewarded gets repeated. What gets rewarded gets repeated. If you reward it, it's going to happen again. If you ignore it, it's like rewarding it. Oh, I got away with it. Oh, yes. So now I can get away with this all the time. And if you want to raise dishonest or disrespectful children, then just ignore those behaviors. That's all you have to do. Just ignore it. Their sin nature will take it from there. Our kids' sin nature will just kind of take it from there if we ignore the dishonest or disrespectful behaviors. And if you want to raise dishonest, they will take it from there. But if you don't want dishonest or disrespectful children or disobedient children, then you have to discipline. Discipline has to be a part of how you raise your kids. And for discipline to be effective, not just scary, right? How many remember as a kid, I remember scary discipline, right? Like I remember that. Yeah, I'm the only one. Okay, I'm going to have to call my parents today. Anybody? Okay, I remember scary discipline, right? But for it to be effective and not just scary, or for something to be, for it to work, it must directly address the fact that a relationship has been damaged because of dishonesty, disrespect, or disobedience. It has to directly address the fact that the 3 Ds always damage relationships. They always do. And the discipline, and so watch. If dishonoring behaviors breaks or undermines a relationship, what should the goal of your discipline be? Right? If the act that was committed breaks a relationship, breaks the trust in a relationship, breaks, an emotional bond in a relationship, whatever it is that it breaks. But if it breaks something, what should the goal of the discipline be? If you think about it, If the functional problem with dishonesty, disrespect, and disobedience is that it disrupts or undermines the relationship between you and your child or between your child and someone else, and if the real issue is a break in the trust, which creates a break in the relationship, then what should the goal of your discipline be? Watch. In other words, when we discipline our children, what should we be trying to accomplish? When we discipline our kids, what should we be trying to accomplish? And I know for a lot of us, like for me even, it never dawned on me to have a goal, to have some sort of end goal, other than for the lesson to be learned that it was wrong and you shouldn't have done it. And so for many parents, and I'm guilty of this, there's not really been this component of having a goal. But if there is no goal, then it's not discipline, it's just punishment. So, now watch this. Punishment equals negative consequences for negative behaviors, right? Punishment is negative consequences for negative behaviors. Punishment is tit for tat. Tit for tat. That's what punishment is. Discipline, however, accepting responsibility and taking steps towards repairing the broken relationship. Discipline has two parts. There's this one, I'm taking responsibility, I'm taking ownership, I understand what I did, and I'm going to take steps in the direction of relationship restoration. See, discipline has a goal. It's ownership and restoration. The message of punishment is like, if you don't obey me, bad things will happen to you. If you don't obey me, bad things are going to happen to you. And when you're thinking about most of the punishment that goes on in the home, it's little more than payback. It's little more than payback, right? It's tit for tat. It's you did something bad, so you're going to get something bad happen to you. You inconvenienced or embarrassed me, so I'm going to inconvenience or embarrass you. Tit for tat. I don't know what that expression really means or where it comes from, so if it's a bad expression, I apologize. So if dishonoring behavior breaks or undermines the relationship, then what should be the goal of the discipline? Watch. Restoration of the relationship. If disobedience, disrespect, and dishonesty damage the relationship, a relationship with you or anyone else, and then discipline should facilitate restoring the relationship. It should facilitate it. The way that you discipline your children should facilitate relational restoration. So here, watch this. Discipline your children in the direction of relationship restoration. First part is ownership. Second part, relational restoration. And the sooner you start with your kids, the better off you will be. The sooner you start, the better. Relationship restoration is something that must be taught. We have an obligation to teach our kids relationship restoration. We have a biblical mandate to teach our kids relationship restoration. Why? Part of it is we all know adults who never figured this out. Adults who never, perhaps maybe you have never figured this out. You've never done this. Maybe you even said things like, I don't know why you're still upset. I said I was sorry. I don't know what you possibly could still be mad about. And you've never learned how to restore a broken relationship. Doesn't saying that you're sorry restore a relationship? No. Doesn't saying that you're sorry get us back to where we were before I did whatever it was that I did? No, it doesn't. In some cases, simply saying that you're sorry is pretty insulting in comparison to the actions that you demonstrated. And if communicating something, it communicates that something must be wrong with you if you're not okay after I said I'm sorry. Something must be wrong with you because I said I'm sorry, and I don't know why you're still. And the fact that so many parents don't understand this example, explains why so many are ineffective in their discipline. They're missing the first component of discipline because they don't understand this component right here. So they punish, and it's a standalone event. They punish their kids, and it's just this one standalone event. It's this tit for tat. It's this you did something bad, so something bad is going to happen to you. And there's no goal, and so there's no lasting outcome. And no one is better or better off. And I think for a lot of us, this is why there's such a lack of creativity in our parenting, in the way that we discipline as parents. As parents, we just take things away. We're just going to take it away. Or we put our kids in timeout. Or when kids are older, parents put them on restriction or ground them, and none of which has anything to do with restoring a broken relationship. We're just going to take the car keys away. We're going to take the Xbox away. We're going to take the phone away. Take away TV time. And the broken relationships remain broken. A parent might say, Jimmy mouthed off to me, so I told him I'm taking away his PlayStation for a week. Well, how's your relationship with Jimmy? He hates me. Awesome. Taking stuff away should be a last resort. Nobody learns anything when something's taken from them. They just try harder not to get caught next time. Try harder not to get caught next time. Now, if you're tracking with me, you may be thinking, so how does this work, right? What does this look like? What do I do as a parent? And I'm going to tell you two stories from parents who have lived this out really, really well. So I'll give you these two examples in a minute, but also, here's what I know, that you are smart enough to figure this out. That you are smart enough. Once you hear the stories, you go, oh, I get it. Okay, you'll get it. You'll figure this out. You'll figure it out once you recognize this. Watch. The heart of every transgression, at the heart of every transgression, is a damaged relationship. At the heart of every transgression is a damaged relationship. Consequently, the discipline must, in some ways, restore the damaged relationship. Otherwise, it's not discipline, it's just behavior modification. If it doesn't restore broken relationships, it's just taking things away. It's just tit for tat. It's just trying to get, like we said last week, where obedience is the lowest common denominator for how we want our kids to act. You're just operating at the lowest common denominator. And if it involves someone outside of your family, the relationship may never be completely restored because the other party may not be interested in having a relationship anymore. Even in a situation like that, you still need to coach your kids in the art of rebuilding a relationship bridge. We still have to show them how to do this. So here's the first part. We talked about it a little bit already. And probably you've got this first part down. And the first part is probably you got it down as soon as your kids could talk, right? As soon as your kids could talk, you probably taught them to apologize. At least I hope. And an apology is the first part of relationship restoration. It's the ownership part. of relationship restoration. We have to teach our kids how to apologize. But here's a tip. Require your child to apologize in complete sentences. Require your children to apologize in complete sentences. Like, sorry is not a complete sentence. Sorry is not a complete sentence. Sorry is a sorry excuse for an apology. They've got to own it. And so they need to add a pronoun. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Teach them to look the person in the eye. I'm sorry. When they say it, teach them to look them in the eye, but don't stop there. Your kids need to understand that that their dishonesty or their disrespectfulness or that they've taken something away from the other person and that they owe them. That's why we say, right, when we say, you owe them an apology. Something was taken away. The trust was broken. The disrespect, something, you took something away. And so now there's this, you owe. And so when we say, but in some cases, they owe them more than just an apology. Sometimes this is where it can stop. Just that you're going to apologize, and that's devastating enough to a kid sometimes, right? Like, you're going to create some relationship restoration, and I know this person well enough to know that if they just hear, I'm sorry, relationship restored, everything will be great. But here's what I also recommend that you teach your kids. It's this right here. I'm sorry I'm sorry I kicked you in the throat when you weren't looking. Okay? Which I've had to apologize a lot for. I don't know why. I'm sorry and then talk about what it is. Make them name it so they can own it. When they say, I'm sorry they're owning it. I'm sorry I disobeyed you, Mom. I'm sorry I lied to you, Dad. I'm sorry and then add this. They'll hate this. All right. Which is the best part of being a parent. It's a joke, guys. I'm sorry I kicked you in the throat. Is there anything I can do to make it up to you? Especially when it comes to siblings. Oh, they'll hate that the most. When they have to say that to a sister or a brother. I'm sorry I took that away from you without asking. Is there anything I can do to make it up to you? This is how you help them understand that they took something away. There was a breach in the relationship and that they owe something as a result. And you're laying the groundwork, this is step one, for relationship restoration. Here's step two. Step two is to be creative. We got to be creative. So I'm going to tell you a couple stories from people who have parented this way that I just admire the way that they've raised their kids. So the first one is there's a couple and they're pastors and they wanted to do a date night, and I believe they were youth pastors at the time, and so they have two boys, and the boys were about 8 and 9 years old, and somewhere in there, and so they got a family friend to watch. They got a family friend to watch the two boys, and so when the couple they went on the date, they came home, and the boys were already in bed. And the babysitter kind of looked a little uncomfortable, and so she worked up the courage to tell the parents that, hey, the boys were terrible. I mean, they were they did not behave well at all. And so the parents, they were very grateful that the babysitter was willing to share this information with them and not, and whatever. And so the parents were, kind of going, oh, so they didn't wake up the kids. They didn't wake up the kids that night to handle it. They slept on it. And they think, how can we discipline towards relationship restoration? So the next morning, the mom gets up and wakes the boys up, wakes him up a little bit early, tells him to get dressed, put on some nice clothes. And she sits the boys down, and they have to write a note of apology. They have to write a note of apology to the babysitter. And she spells it all. Make sure you say, now, I'm sorry for da-da-da-da, and is there anything I can do to make it up to you? Write out the whole thing. So then she says, and meet me in the van. So the boys get in the van, and she tells them, go to your little wallets and get some money out of your jar or whatever, your wallet, and meet me in the van. So the boys get in the van, they get buckled up. So then the mom tells them, now we're going to the store, and we're going to buy a card, and we're going to buy flowers with your money. And we're going to drive to where the babysitter works, and we're going to drop off this card and these flowers, and you're going to apologize and take responsibility for what you did. So the babysitter doesn't know any of this is happening, and the boys, of course, are mortified that, I got to spend my money on flowers, and, if this really hurt them, at this point, they probably rather would have been punished, right? They would probably rather have something taken away. But no, they're parenting towards relationship restoration. And so they get there to the babysitter's work, and the boys come in, and they've got these flowers, and they got this card, and so they find the babysitter. Nobody knows this is happening, and they recite what they had rehearsed. I'm sorry, for what we did, and any way we can make it up to you, and whatever. And the babysitter is in tears and takes the flowers, and it was like humiliating for the kids, and it was perfect, and the relationship was restored. They could have taken an Xbox away, or a PlayStation away, or a gaming system away, or they could have taken, playtime or TV time or whatever. They could have taken something away. But instead, they decided to be parents that wanted to discipline towards relationship restoration. And now, those boys learned a valuable lesson about what they can get or cannot get away with when it comes to a babysitter. Second story is several years later, one of those same boys was incredibly disrespectful to their mother. Incredibly. They were just barely old enough to drive, but they were old enough to drive, and one of the boys was incredibly disrespectful to their mother. And so much so that the dad was at work, and he was like, when he heard about it, he was angry, and he comes home, and he's like furious, and just like, he's really mad, and so, but he's decided, I'm upset right now, I'm going to take some time, and I'm not going to discipline or punish out of this emotion, or punish out of anger, or punish out of whatever. I'm going to take some time, and I'm going to come up with a way that we can discipline towards relationship restoration. And the mom was, just brokenhearted, crying, and just, she was really mistreated by something he said, I believe. So a couple of days go by, and the dad comes up with this great idea. So he calls the son. Hey, son, here's what you're going to do. You're going to take your mom out on a date. You're going to have to ask her to go on the date with you. You're going to drive. You're going to choose a nice restaurant ahead of time. And you're going to pay. You're going to pay. Now, I can imagine that the kid's probably thinking, can I just turn in my keys? I don't want to. I have to ask my mom on a date. I don't want to do this. So he does. He asks his mom on a date. He takes her somewhere nice. And of course, naturally, they started talking. And without being told or coerced, he apologized in a natural way, in a natural setting, when he wasn't forced to. They talked, and they reconnected, and there was an apology. And it all happened organically, almost, it felt like. And And the mom says, looking back on it now years later, that it's one of her most cherished moments of her life. One of her most cherished moments of her life. All because they disciplined towards relationship restoration. See, if your child was rude to their teacher, then you have to discipline towards relationship restoration. If your child was disrespectful to their coach, you have to discipline towards relationship restoration. If your child was dishonest with a friend, you have to discipline towards relationship restoration. And if your child is disobedient and you see it, they're disobedient to your spouse, you have to discipline towards relationship restoration. And you can do this. You can do this as parents. You can do this. It takes a little creativity, and sometimes it's okay to take a little time to come up with the discipline. But you can do this. Now, you may be asking this morning, what is this from? Like, what kind of New Age book did we get this out of? Well, it's this New Age book right here. It's called the Bible. We get this concept from the center of our faith. Romans 3:23 says, for all have sinned. In other words, and broken relationship with God. For all of us have broken relationship with God. And what did God do? Did he punish us? No. He didn't have to. Why? Because Romans 6:23 talks about that the wages of sin is death. When it comes to sin, there's this built-in payment plan. There's a built-in wage. It's automatic. And it collects so much interest and the price is so high that it doesn't matter how much you try to pay it back, you can't pay it back. You'll never catch up on those payments. All sin comes prepackaged with its own punishment. And instead of worrying about punishing us, God made the first move of relationship restoration. He moved towards us. And then he called us as his followers. And he sent us out to restore our own broken relationships. The ones that we broke through our dishonesty and our disrespect. And the ones that we damaged through our impatience and unkindness and dishonesty. And all those types of behaviors. And he has given us a responsibility to teach this to our children. Teach our children how to restore their relationships as well. So loan your kids your strength. Stop with the sarcasm. And discipline towards relationship restoration. And that's good parenting. That's good parenting. And that's what our Heavenly Father did for us. Let's pray.